Chapter 5 Among Smiling Faces. Ever since Chrysalis almost starved on Toneshift's floor, the two hadn't said very much to each other, outside of greeting each other in the morning. It had been almost 2 days now, with Chrysalis recently informing him that she would need to consume more love sometime soon if she wanted to avoid going hungry. Toneshift understood, but was unsure how to go about helping her get any. At about noon of the second day, Toneshift rose from his desk and glanced towards Chrysalis. I'm gonna go for some lunch. Want some eggs? He asked with a stretch, letting out a pleased sigh afterward as his stiff back relaxed somewhat.
I would, yes,
Chrysalis said, standing from the couch and trotting toward him.
I would like food, and you are going to teach me how to prepare it.
Oh, really? All right, I guess. Okay, I can help you with that. Just don't stray from my instructions, all right? I don't want my house burning down. Toneshift replied with a mild amount of playful snark in his tone.
If your house burns down, it is only because your instructions were terrible,
Chrysalis shot back. Toneshift rolled his eyes and gestured for her to enter the kitchen before him. Ladies first. Chrysalis merely grunted in mild annoyance at the display before strutting into the kitchen. Toneshift followed her soon after. She glanced around for a moment before her eyes settled on the stove.
So, where do I start?
With a bowl and 2 eggs. Eggs are in the fridge, and I keep the bowls in the cupboard up there, Tone replied, gesturing to each container as he referenced them. Chrysalis didn't say anything, merely withdrawing the bowl from the cupboard with her magic. She opened the door on the fridge and withdrew the egg carton in her magic as well, eyeing it quizzically.
Only 2? Seems like an awfully small amount, she commented curiously, opening the carton and pulling out 2 eggs.
Yes, just 2. That's how many I was taught to make when I started out all the way back in school. Start small and all that, Toneshift replied with a shrug.
Uh-huh.
Chrysalis hummed before returning the carton to the fridge. Okay, go ahead and break those eggs over the bowl and pour the contents in. Try not to let any shards get mixed in. They are a massive pain in the plot to remove and are annoying to eat, Toneshift instructed, watching and slightly impressed at the precision with which Chrysalis practically split both eggs perfectly in half before draining the contents into the bowl.
Next?
Go ahead and mix those together until it's basically a big mass of raw yellow. Go ahead and get a frying pan out when that's done, and they're in the left cabinet. It went on like this for a short while, Chrysalis soon holding a spoon in her magic and looking at a frying pan on the stove, about half of it covered in egg yolk. She looked at the spoon and then to Toneshift.
Why a spoon? I always thought eggs were handled with spatulas.
I mean, they usually are, and they certainly can be, but my spatula broke a few weeks back, and so a spoon is about as good as I can do on that front. Plus, spoons are surprisingly good for scrambling, he replied simply, nodding towards the stove. Go ahead and turn that up to medium, front left burner. Use that spoon to stir it while it hardens up. Keep doing the stir motion, and eventually you'll be scrambling instead of stirring, he instructed before turning for the door.
Where do you think you're going?
Chrysalis asked, glancing in his direction with narrowed eyes. To use the bathroom. I'll be back shortly, just keep an eye on that, Toneshift replied before stepping out and towards the bathroom. Chrysalis rolled her eyes before turning them back to the pan, an immediate sense of underwhelmment overcoming her as she beheld the pitifully small pan of slowly cooking eggs.
It's just far too small,
she grumbled irritably, contemplating for a moment.
I'm sure one more egg won't hurt it.
She used her magic to teleport another egg into the air, split it in half, and let the contents fall into the pan with a wet plop. she began the stirring motions Tone Shift had mentioned. Why do I smell smoke? Tone Shift found himself thinking from the toilet as he finished up his business. Removing himself from the seat and flushing, a look of realization dawned on his face. Oh, you have got to be kidding me! He half shouted as he wrenched open the door of his bathroom and bolted towards the kitchen. Upon entering the room, Tone Shift let his jaw drop slightly. Chrysalis's face was covered in the remnants of a burst bubble in her pan of eggs, which was now somewhat ajar with one of Tone Shift's washcloths thoroughly on fire. Chrysalis herself was using her magic to pour water into a glass from the sink. Tone Shift finally managed to close his mouth and set a death glare at Chrysalis as she poured the water on the burning rag, putting it out. Tone Shift then trotted up to the stove and turned off the burner, glancing down to the pan of eggs, only halfway done cooking, and unevenly at that. He ran a hoof over his face before turning to look at Chrysalis. How the buck did you manage this? He demanded, holding up the cloth for emphasis. Eggs! 2 eggs! Stir them with the spoon and you're good! How in Tartarus were you able to get eggs on your face, knock the pan off of its burner, and then light a washcloth on fire? He threw the cloth to the ground and glared at Chrysalis aggressively. Chrysalis blinked at him slightly at the onslaught of words before pointing at the cloth on the floor. Did you just throw down the gauntlet with a washcloth? She asked coyly, earning a twitch of the eye from Tone. He gestured to himself. Question? Then at Chrysalis. Answer! Then he stomped on the floor. Do it! Ugh, it wasn't big enough, I'll have you know. It could never have satisfied me. Chrysalis snarked, losing the humor in her voice. Is that right? You know, most ponies have less than that for lunch and don't complain. And I am no pony. I am Queen Chrysalis. I have standards. And those standards say that there is no way I'd take so little inside me, considering the effort I was exerting just to make it serve its purpose. Tone Shift stopped short of whatever comment he was about to make before letting his head fall to stare at the floor. For a moment, Chrysalis grinned triumphantly, believing he had no good counter-argument. When he burst out into a fit of uncontrollable giggles, however, she took on a look of bewilderment. What are you doing? You have no idea. No idea how that sounded to me. Tone said between laughs, unable to make himself stop. I don't... Chrysalis stopped herself as she realized it. She glared at him, but seemed to almost shrink slightly. Tone could have sworn her cheeks had just gotten a touch brighter. Shut up! Oh, goodness. Oh, that was rich. Tone managed as he started to calm down. Chrysalis simply gave him a look that said, I hate you and I wish I was anywhere else right now. After they had gotten the mess cleaned up and Chrysalis ate something, albeit Tone Shift cooked it this time, they sat in relative silence in the living room. Chrysalis nestled once more into the cushions and reading through the second book from the bag Tone had gotten for her. As for Tone himself, he was just staring idly into nothing, fidgeting uncomfortably every so often on his side of the couch. Finally, he got up and stretched slightly. I think I'm going to go for a walk. I haven't been active enough these last few days. It's really making me antsy, he said as he turned to head for the door. Wait, Chrysalis suddenly blurted, giving Tone pause. She looked away slightly. I
I'm going with you this time.
Tone Shift blinked in surprise, noting how Chrysalis almost seemed to be hiding behind her own mane. Really? Why the change of heart?
You didn't reveal me to Princess Twilight. That, and I'm still getting hungry. A stroll through town should be enough to at least get in some passive snacking, even if my dignity will forever suffer as a result,
she said, looking back up at him. Well, if you're tagging along, we need a disguise and a name for you to use in public, Tone said, going into thought. A swirl of green fire brought his attention back to Chrysalis, who had now assumed the shape and form he had first seen her in. A unicorn with a dark green coat, dull blue mane and tail, and she had not assigned herself a cutie mark yet. But just like that, a name occurred to him, and he blurted it out before he could really catch himself. Wildwood Luster.
Begging your pardon?
Chrysalis questioned, having not been paying attention to his thoughtful expression. Her voice had changed, the two-toned distortion vanishing, and replaced with a softer, smoother voice. Well, when we first met, you were in a forest, basically living in it. Forests are wild and unpredictable places with a lot of wood thanks to them being made of trees and all, so wildwood. Luster is a word referring to how something reflects light, like shimmers or sparkles, like in magic. And being a unicorn as you are now, you have magic, so I feel the name is fitting, Tone explained, giving a few rolls of his hoof as he spoke.
I see.
A patch of fur on each of her flanks lit up with more green fire for a moment, burning a cutie mark into her disguise. It was of a circle of wood, with a noticeably large knot in the very center, with the ancient pony rune meaning magic burned into the heart of the knot. Tone Shift gave a small smile and nodded. That'll work. With that, he turned to the door handle and pushed it open, letting sunlight stream into the room from outside. Chrysalis, or rather, he supposed, Wildwood Luster, winced as it reached her. She had been holed up in this house for quite a while, with the curtains usually blocking out a lot of the light. Tone stepped aside and gestured in a theatrical bow for Luster to go first. Ladies first?
I'm still a lady after nearly burning down your kitchen?
She shot back with a mild smirk. Would you rather I call you a horse or a mule?
I'd rather you shut your face before I crush it with the door.
And we're leaving, Tone declared, stepping outside and gesturing for Luster to follow him. She hesitated for a moment, a last vestige of doubt and resentment playing across her face before, finally, she stepped out into the pleasant late summer air. For the first 20 minutes or so, Luster only ever spoke when prompted to by Tone, trying to keep quiet so as to not say anything suspicious. After that, though, she gradually started to open up, in a sense, forming an identity for herself with practiced ease. As the two walked through the streets, stopping at merchant stalls, even if only to browse and look, they would periodically be greeted by the other residents of Ponyville, many of which were rather curious about Luster. She put on a friendly, albeit reserved smile whenever this would happen, replying to questions with short but consistent answers, building the persona of a mare of few words. All ponies seemed put off at all by this, many of them walking away with happy grins at having met some pony new. And Chrysalis discreetly sucking up the love that was in the air and all around her. And then Pinkie happened. A loud bang and an enormous explosion of confetti from behind the two drew a startled yelp from Tone and Luster. Pinkie Pie let out a happy squeak at the sight of some pony she didn't know, bouncing in place happily, while a veritable tsunami of excited words spilled forth from her yap. Neither Tone Shift or Luster could really understand much of what was said due to how quickly she was speaking. Plus, their ears were still ringing from the cannon blast that had covered them head to hoof in confetti and streamers.
Should I be scared?
Luster droned out, her face showing that she was now resigned to her fate. No, but still, you should definitely brace yourself, Tone replied with equal resignation.
Oh, hiya, my name's Pinkie Pie. What's your name?
Pinkie finally said something coherent, holding a hoof out to Luster with an enormous grin splitting her face.
Wildwood Luster?
Luster managed, taking a step back from Pinkie's hoof with disdain.
Ooh, that's a pretty name.
Pinkie's smile became more controlled as the initial wave of excitement became more of a steady stream rather than a high-pressure tsunami.
You must be new here.
She's been here for a few days, actually, Pinkie. Tone corrected her simply. He couldn't help but notice the uneasy glance Luster shot his way. Pinkie gasped loudly.
What? You mean there's a new pony in town and I haven't welcomed them properly yet?
She reached off to the side of the road and pulled out a colorful wagon with a big red button on it. She smiled brightly and reached for the button. You braced yet? Tone asked quietly.
As much as I'm going to be,
Luster replied, eyeing the weird contraption as Pinkie's hoof touched the big red button. Click. The top of the wagon sprung up, and a marching band's worth of curious various instruments popped out of the top, playing. Pinkie grinned before breaking into a dance, the instruments playing a very lively song as she did. Pinkie was now kneeling in front of the two, forelegs spread out wide and a playful smirk crossing her face.
Wait for it.
A compartment opened on the wagon, unleashing a merciless onslaught of more confetti and more streamers. Despite it having no clear means of detecting or directing a target, all of the party decor managed to land right on Luster. For a few seconds, Luster just stood there, her now thoroughly disheveled mane covering her eyes from view, and her mouth was pulled into a thin, tense line. Her upper lip twitched slightly before she spoke.
Thank you. It's great to feel welcome,
she said sarcastically through clenched teeth, in a voice that barely disguised a great deal of agitation. Pinkie didn't even notice, her smile brightening.
It's great to make ponies feel welcome. If you ever need a smile, just let me know,
Pinkie declared enthusiastically before turning and bouncing happily away. Luster turned to look at Tone and glared at him from under her mane with an almost desperate look in her eyes.
We're done out here,
she said. It wasn't a request. I am in complete agreement, Toneshift replied.